Gott im Himmel.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Wimbledon.
Mr. Goat saw those ridiculous hats during the show prep and took off.
This is fascinating. That's one word for it.
Maybe he thought I was going to make him wear one of those fascinating hats. Today on Coffee Break Tennis, Mr. Goat's supercomputer has one more prediction. Only problem? The name Kevin Anderson is involved, and so far, that's not a good sign. Simpson's Paradox. What is it? And why does it tell us that Roger Federer has the worst record in the history of tennis? And a big thanks to Tom, who commented that article to me below. I would have never even seen it if it wasn't for Tom, so thanks, Tom. Serena saves her very worst for the final, and we take a look at some of the stats behind the incredibly long, in fact, the longest semifinals in history. All that and more on Coffee Break Tennis. Welcome to the fastest growing tennis talk show in the universe. So let's get into the supercomputer first. Kevin Anderson, 59.75, Mr. Goat supercomputer power ranking score. Novak Djokovic, a 2.25 favorite with a 62. A real quick look at what made those numbers possible. 68% first serve in for Anderson. Novak Djokovic is getting 71%. 82% win on first serve. Novak Djokovic very close to Kevin Anderson. You'd think Kevin Anderson's big first serve would give him a huge advantage over Novak. But you know what? Speed's not everything, as Roger Federer has taught us. And one thing Novak Djokovic has been doing very well at this tournament is hitting some great spots with his first serve. So although his first serve is much slower than Serena Williams, it turned out. Anyway, so 81% is a 1% difference. 56% win on second serve for Anderson, which is really not the best considering how good of a serve Anderson has. Novak Djokovic, 52% win on second, one of the worst out of the top guys for even the round of 16. And where Novak Djokovic has just been killing everyone, and it took its toll on Rafa's serve numbers. 44% return from Novak Djokovic versus a 33% win on return from Kevin Anderson. Let's look at some X factors from that. There you are. Oh, welcome to the show, Mr. Goat. Please do not hit the button that turns the microphone off again. What's that? Mr. Goat heard me totally forget my intro to the show that I planned on doing today when we were doing show prep earlier, and ran back down here apparently to clean himself and to chastise me for skipping over an intro that he worked very hard on. So the intro was something like this. I was right about one thing. There is a 10-year anniversary greatest match of all time reunion party celebration going on. The thing I missed was it's not Roger and Rafa playing against each other on Sunday in the final. But think about it. Even on Wednesday, Friday, well, obviously today as well, we've had 4 epic 5-set matches, including one where Rafa Nadal wins in the end as the sun is almost gone and there's very little light. Of course, that was over Juan Martín del Potro. Of course, Roger was featured in an epic 5-setter where he loses in disappointing fashion in a very long 5th set, kind of like 10 years ago. And of course, if we're going to celebrate the epic 5-setter at Wimbledon, we got to get John Isner in on the action, and he definitely did his part in giving us the second longest match ever at Wimbledon and the longest semifinal ever. Settling in, Mr. Goat? Oh, God, I forgot how good coffee tastes. It's better than wine. Much better. And now this most recent 5-setter that had to be split up in 2 days. Djokovic wins, but how close was Rafa to breaking Djokovic at 7-all, and winning that match 9-7 in the 5th. I mean, would that not have been my choice if Rafa makes the final because he's a man of destiny, getting that same scoreline that he won the 5th set over Roger Federer all those years ago? You know how I love the numbers. Well, what better way to celebrate the epic 5-setter at Wimbledon than by giving us 5 of them in these final closing rounds at the tournament? We may get one more 5-setter. Heck, maybe someone will win it 9-7 in the 5th tomorrow. So let's look more at this match that we've got coming. Some X factors. Time spent on court. I thought this would be a major factor for Kevin Anderson, but it wasn't in the Isner match. Will it be a fact? Can he come back from 2 really long matches? I don't know. All I'm going to say is I don't ever want to bet against the guy again. In fact, I'm betting all of Mr. Goat's cat food on Kevin Anderson winning tomorrow. So Djokovic, 15 hours and 34 minutes. Of course, the most recent match is the one that's the hardest to recover from, and that's where we get our Kavit. 5 hours, 15. Anderson, 21 hours and 1 minute. No surprise, very long time. His last match, 6 hours and 36 minutes. The only problem is his match finished before Djokovic's match with Rafa even started yesterday. Today, Djokovic had to finish a very emotional match. Now, Djokovic is a fitness machine, one of the fittest guys in the world. I don't think he's going to be too exhausted, but then again, this is the first time Novak Djokovic has had to play 7 matches in one tournament in a long, long time. What is it, 2 years? So will fitness be a factor? The only thing I'll say is this. I don't know if it's going to be a factor, but if you were really worried that Kevin Anderson will just be too tired, at least we can say Djokovic might be a little tired himself, and he has even less time to rest and recover when compared to Kevin Anderson. Aces, Anderson with 172, Djokovic with 100 less, more than 100 less, 64. Double faults, Anderson almost doubling Djokovic, 23 doubles to 12 doubles. Breaks of serve, Novak Djokovic has been the best returner at the tournament, no doubt about that. 35 breaks, Anderson with 22. And I've got the power rankings from, the Final Four, except I threw Federer in there, remember that. Let's take a look at the numbers from, first let me just talk about Isner and Anderson. Anderson is much fitter than I thought possible for a guy his size. I knew Anderson is more fit than ever. You can tell the guy works really hard. I knew he's playing a better ground game than he ever has. We got to see some of it at the U.S. Open. But the way he didn't bring his best on the biggest stage at the U.S. Open, the Arthur Ashe, well, actually, that's the biggest tennis stadium in the world. The way he didn't bring his very best, and you could say got a little nervous against a big name like Rafa, led me to believe, and remember, I did say this in the draw show, I'm kind of embarrassed about it now. I said something like, quote, Kevin Anderson, that's a joke for Roger Federer at Wimbledon in the quarterfinals. So maybe I did jinx Roger Federer. I know a lot of people mad at me. I know a lot of people are also mad at me that I said maybe court 1 was a factor. Look, I think the roof being closed for Rafa is a factor as well. And I don't want to criticize anyone for blaming the roof. I understand how they feel. Let's put it this way. In 2012, when they closed the roof, Andy Murray, Roger Federer in the final, I was jumping for joy. If you're a Joker fan and you were jumping for joy, I totally understand. If you're a Rafa fan and you were upset, I get it. Rafa was upset too. He tried to not get into it in the press conference, but he totally did a little bit. I don't blame the guy. I get they have this rule. If you close the roof to start it, you got to close the roof to finish it. Rafa doesn't think it's a good roof. I mean, he definitely doesn't like the roof. Rafa doesn't think it's a good rule. And Rafa felt like, hey, the weather was perfect. You shouldn't have closed it on the second day. I understand how he feels. They got this rule. They had the curfew. The women, and a lot of people, felt like it was not cool to have the men bleed into their start time. But then again, was it fair for the longest semifinal of all time to push back, way push back the start time for the men? I'm sure it didn't help anybody to have to wonder, when are we going to start? When do I warm up? When do I eat? It is an issue, but it's just part of playing these big tournaments. At Wimbledon, sometimes this stuff happens. Things were even worse when they didn't have the roof, when you would have matches get rained out and pushed back for days. Remember that match with John Isner and Nicolas Mahut? It took like 3 days. So why did John Isner lose? The supercomputer had him. Big advantage. How did Kevin Anderson do it? Well, I think when you get into that 5th set and you got the 2 guys with like the worst return games in that stage of the tournament and the best serves, it kind of makes sense. And then all bets are off the table. Then it becomes, you saw it was like a war of attrition. Who is the fittest? Whose body can produce a decent return game the longest? And, John Isner, it was really crazy to watch that match because John Isner was taking a lot of speed off. Like if he was up 40-15, 30-15, he wasn't hitting the serve as hard as he could because he was trying to save his arm for when he had a break point to save or something like that. Clearly, Kevin Anderson, a couple inches shorter, I think that helped. Much better mover than John Isner. That was a big X factor that maybe I should have considered a little bit more. Way more endurance than John Isner. Maybe, being a couple inches shorter, a little less weight to carry around. Maybe that's a factor, but I think Kevin Anderson is just one of the fittest guys in the sport right now, and it's really paying off. Maybe it will pay off against Novak Djokovic. Unfortunately, though, Djokovic is one of the fittest guys around. But Kevin Anderson has returned fairly well, better than John Isner at least. I don't know if Anderson can return the way Rafa did, but Novak Djokovic's second serve has been somewhat of a weakness. If Novak Djokovic didn't get so many first serves in, if his first serves in were lower, maybe Rafa would have had a better shot at winning that match. I mean, Rafa came very close, obviously. That could have been a deciding factor. Novak Djokovic's return was definitely a deciding factor because as we look here at the stats, put him on the screen, Mr. GOAT, he's asleep. Right there. Hit the button, Mr. GOAT. Thank you. Novak Djokovic win on first serve was the stat he beat Rafa in here, and receiving points won, win on return points. So that's a big deal. If you're winning more points on serve, not winning more points on second serve, but both of these guys got so many first serves in, not as much of a factor was the second serve. So look at these power rankings that I took before the semifinal matches, and Novak Djokovic nailed his number. He averaged 71% all tournament long, 71% first serve in. Rafa, on the other hand, raised his game. He was getting 68. He raised it 3 points to get 71% first serve in as well. No question about it, though. Look, Novak Djokovic, 23 aces. Rafa with 9, which is pretty high for him, actually. Both with 4 double faults. Now, Nole is winning 9% more on the first serve. His average was 83% first serve win, 76 here. So the Rafa return was a factor. It took that number down. The average for Djokovic, 54 win on second. One of the lower averages of all the players in the latter stages of this tournament. That got knocked down to 47. 7% knockdown. Rafa, on the other hand, though, he was winning 67. He was the king of win on second serve in this tournament. Roger was doing pretty well, too. He was second place with 61. Rafa, 67% in this match. He got knocked all the way down thanks to the Nole return. 10 points to 57. His 74% win on first serve got knocked down a nice 7%. So the same that what he knocked down the win on first for Nole, 7%. But Nole started at a much higher 83, 9% higher. The return win, 41% win on return is what Rafa had been doing. Well, Djokovic served so well to knock that down to 36. Nadal, truly inspired. The man of destiny, like I said all along. He's able to knock the return win 47% for Djokovic all the way down to 36. That's a major drop, but 36 is still better than 32. This is craziest of all, though. Look at the winners to unforced errors. 73 winners, 42 unforced errors for both of the players. Break points won. Djokovic, with his great return, bought himself more chances. 4 out of 19, 4 out of 11 for Nadal. So what really won this match? Well, obviously the fifth set was pretty important. But man, how important was that third set tiebreaker before they had to stop the match that Djokovic almost lost? You could argue that Rafa looked like the better player for the whole of that tiebreaker. Of course, Djokovic got it all together just in time to win that thing. That was one of the most fun sets of the entire tournament, especially knowing that they were going to have to stop playing any minute. I think they went like 1 minute over the curfew to finish that tiebreaker. Maybe another factor is Djokovic managed to run Nadal about an extra 1,000 feet. Anderson, same thing. I think 1,500 feet he forced Isner to run more. Anderson's got a much better ground game. Before we move on, what do we want to talk about next today? I'll save the Simpsons paradox stuff for later. It's really interesting. There's been a big stink about should they get rid of the no tiebreakers in the fifth set at Wimbledon. Some people say, let's do it at 12-all. I'll say this for sure. Don't take it out of the final. We don't want to eliminate the possibility of a 9-7 in the fifth, greatest match of all time that we had 10 years ago, by getting rid of it in the final. So definitely keep it the same in the final. It's not like you have to recover to play another match after the final, so I think it's okay. I think it's fun to have these epic fifth sets in the final, so I wouldn't get rid of that. But I think there is a case to be made, because look at John Isner and Kevin Anderson. They got to feel like neither one of them can win the tournament after a match that long. Now, at the time, they didn't know that Rafa and Joker were going to have a very physical match that was almost just as long. Now, not games-wise, obviously way more games, but those big servers, their games are a little faster and a little less physical in the rallies compared to Joker and Rafa. So at the time, they didn't know that Joker and Rafa were going to have a match that was only about, an hour and 15 minutes shorter. So there is maybe an argument there. I've heard things like, do a tiebreaker at 9-all, 10-all, 12-all. I could get behind that. I'm not 100% sure. I like the history of the game. Rod Laver was there watching that match, and I have to wonder if maybe he thought like, oh, I remember these really long fifth sets. Back then, they could have a first set like that, too. There was no tiebreakers anyway, so I bet Rod Laver got a kick out of seeing those guys have to do that. So comment below. I'm very curious to hear what you think. Should they get rid of the no tiebreakers in the fifth set at Wimbledon? I'm kind of torn on it. I think there's a case to be made in the earlier rounds, but don't do it in the final. The final, got to keep that the same, for sure. Take a quick look at Angie Kerber. Congratulations to Angelique Kerber. That was a very impressive win. Serena, this is very impressive. The fact that she got to the final, all she's been through, barely played this year. So clap for Serena. Nothing to be ashamed of here. But I did point out in the beginning of the show, she kind of saved her worst for the final. Was she just worn out after all the tennis? Was Angelique Kerber just the right game to give her trouble? You know, you have the power versus the super counterpuncher who loves to absorb the power. So it's not the greatest matchup for Serena. Kerber's serve, very attackable by Serena. Let's look at the numbers. Serena got a higher percent. It's funny because I kept hearing during the match, and I saw most of the match. I kept hearing them say, oh, Serena's first serve is totally gone. Well, she got 75% in, but I'm guessing, I don't see the average speed here. They don't show it. So if you look at the average serve speeds here, yeah, Serena did hit a 125 serve, but the average goes down 20 miles an hour to 105. That's really not too big of a, 8 miles an hour can be pretty big gap in tennis, but considering how much more she can do than Kerber on the first serve, 105 versus 97, not the biggest deal. And only 9 miles an hour faster on the second serve. But the thing was, here's the killer. Look at the winners to unforced errors. Kerber won way more on return. Kerber won way more on second serve. Serena's second serve was definitely not there. 31% win on second serve, 63 on first. Serena's used to getting more than that. That's why I started wondering, well, maybe the speed was way down or something. She got 9% more first serves in, of course, but not a big factor. Only 4 aces. You would think Serena would bring more aces in a Wimbledon final. Receiving points won, blah, blah, blah. This is the big thing. Look at the winners to unforced errors. Kerber, only 11 winners, only 5 unforced errors. Serena, and this is almost half the points that Kerber won in the whole match, 24 unforced errors. Now, 23 winners. That's very good, Serena. But 24 unforced errors, more unforced errors than winners. I think that's really the story of the match. We did see Serena try to go to net more because she was kind of losing, kind of like what happened to Roger. You lose faith in your ground strokes when you're making all those unforced errors. The only thing is Roger is better equipped to run in there and play the net. Venus is better equipped to run in there and play the net. Serena, since she's come back, her movement has suffered a little. And I guess that's the biggest thing here. She didn't have they're playing highlights of it right now. In the highlight I just saw, you can see Serena struggling to recover back into the court, giving one of the 11 winners to Angelique Kerber there. Oh, this was a big point right here. 5-3, Kerber serving. Serena could have broke. She plays a great point. She comes to the net and misses a swinging forehand volley long. She falls on the ground. If you watch the match, you remember that. I kind of forgot about that point until I just saw it there. I remember it now. That was a killer. Then one of your classic pusher lob battle points at 30-all. Kerber wins a point where the ball is just getting lobbed up very high. Then she puts it on the line, up the line with a forehand. So that's pretty amazing too. Congratulations to Kerber, but don't worry, this isn't the last we've seen of Serena Williams. And really tells you a lot that if she can get to the final where she is right now with her level and her fitness, as long as she puts in the time and the work, Serena's going to have the fitness. It's going to be way higher, and watch out. The serve will be doing a lot more damage. I think Serena will be winning some majors for sure. What every pro tennis player does, this is from The Atlantic, written by some feller named Ryan Rodenberg. What every pro tennis player does better than Roger Federer. Among active players since 1990, Federer holds the worst record in matches where the loser wins more points than the winner. It's a little confusing, but I'll explain it in a second. This may just be further evidence that he is the greatest. Oh, I like this article already. In the so-called Simpsons paradox, matches where the loser of the match wins more points than the winner. So an easy example of what is Simpsons paradox is, let's say you win a match, you lose the first set 6-0, you get the bagel, and then you win 7-5, 7-5. You've won 14 games, but your opponent has won 16 games. You see where we're going with this? So that's understandable. Sometimes that kind of stuff happens. But if you lose 6-0 and then win 7-5, 7-5, there still is a chance that you've won more points than your opponent overall. And of course, since we have sets and games, winning more points is not enough to win, as we very well know. On the surface, Federer's record 4-24, meaning 4 times he lost more points than his opponent but won, and 24 times, and this is old. This article is almost 5 years old. So he's done it this year 3 times now, where he won more points than the winner, and he lost. So 27? Maybe it's up to 30 now? 24, 30, somewhere in there. He lost the match despite winning more points than the opponent. A deeper inquiry, however, reveals mathematical proof of Federer's unequaled in-match competitiveness over the course of his career. In a recent academic article in Academe, Jeff Sackman and Ben Wright investigated the incidence of point-level Simpson's paradox in tennis. In a data set composed of more than 61,000 men's ATP and Grand Slam matches dating back to 1990, we found that 4.5% of the matches showed these paradoxical characteristics. We then looked at the outlier players with the best and worst respective records to put our results in context. Federer is a victim of the scoring system where all individual points are not created equal. One end of the spectrum is John Isner. At 6'10", Isner unleashes one of the most intimidating serves. Yeah, we know all about the serve. He's also remembered for the winner of the longest match, and now the second longest match, at Wimbledon in 2010, and with a 70-68 fifth set over Nicolas Mahouberry. A quick inspection of the box score, however, shows that Mahou won 24 more points than Isner in that match. But Isner is 19-5. So why is that? Well, they go on to explain in this article that sometimes Isner will lose points on purpose in the service game just so he can have enough energy to serve. And if you watched the match yesterday, you know that it looked like Isner was, as I said earlier in the show, in the fifth set, sometimes he was tanking his own service game points. If he didn't win it off the serve, he's like, well, screw it, I'm not going to run around and rally. It's 40-15. I'll just win it at 40-30 with my big serve. Can't blame him. Look at the way he totally fell apart. I mean, he felt it coming. We all kind of saw it coming in the fourth set. I was believing that Isner was going to win that match the whole way, and then somewhere in the fourth set, I was like, oh my, he's much more tired than Kevin Anderson, and he's about to get a taste of what Roger Federer had in the fifth. Luckily, he's got such a serve, such an overpowering serve. You know, one thing I wished that Roger would have done more at is just hit that kick serve as hard as you can right at Kevin Anderson. Just make that thing fly up in his big chest, or his face if you can kick it high enough. Big, tall guy, that might be tricky. John Isner was very good about pretty much hitting him with his serve. You saw a lot of times where he jumped out of the way. Oh, by the way, I only have one highlight for today's show because this was incredible. Kevin Anderson deserves to win the tournament, I would almost say, because of this. Check this out.
Lefty.
Left hand.
It's in.
Oh, it's in.
We've seen it.
If you've ever tried to hit a left-handed forehand when you're a right-handed player, you know how difficult that could be. Now, he's got a great two-handed backhand, so two-handed backhand is basically your right hand's on it and your left hand is hitting a left-handed forehand, so that does make it a little easier. You know, it might be harder for Roger to hit a left-handed forehand that well since he's always hitting a one-handed backhand. Nevertheless, very impressive. He didn't even see the racket is the best part. He's reaching around there, looking for the racket, watching the ball, trying to set up the point, like, okay, how am I going to play this? Where's John Isner? I got the racket. Oh, it's in my left hand. Here it is. Pretty awesome stuff. So the point, God, long story short. So the point was, the whole point of that is Isner might tank, might kind of not go as hard as he can on so many return points, just relying on his serve, that it's a lot easier for him to win a match where he didn't win as many points. It makes a lot more sense. At the other end of Simpson's paradox spectrum was, of course, Roger Federer. He's 4-24. Of course, that's gone up on the losing column for sure. Federer's winning percentage in these matches is 14. Of course, that's gone down. The worst among all 72 players in the sample. So they only sampled 72 players since 1990 have been involved in 20 matches where the winner did not win as many points as the loser. This result surprised us, as it differed wildly from other players who similarly had won multiple Grand Slam titles. Agassi, Nadal, Sampras, Bruguera, Marat Safin, Leighton Hewitt, Kafelnikov, Gustavo Kuerten, all 500 or better. The Jim Courier is the only player worse than 50-50, but he's 11-15. Not like Roger, who's probably something like 5-30 now, assuming that he's won a match since 4.5 years ago, where he didn't win as many points as the opponent. So we probed Federer's matches further. Our analysis was revealing. There are two non-mutually exclusive explanations for Federer's curious result. And what they basically go on for here is the go-for-broke strategy. When facing a heavily favored opponent, the underdog must be willing to assume a greater than average risk. Statistical language, one would say that an underdog must be willing to adopt a strategy whose outcome has a larger than average variance. What does that mean? Go for broke, baby. You got to return big swings. You got to try to hurt Roger on the serve, like that match point that Djokovic saved. That took a lot of risk. Go for broke strategy right there. Like, yeah, let's just try to hit a winner off Roger's first serve. Worked out there. Doesn't always work out, right? In tennis, such a go-for-broke strategy involves hitting aggressive second serves and high-risk, high-reward returns when Federer is serving, knowing that their normal playing strategy would be unsuccessful against the near-unbeatable Roger Federer. Oh, I like that part. Mr. Goat, you like that part? I don't know if the microphone picked up that sound. Sorry, he's not happy I woke him up. Second, we can infer that Federer does not engage in any short-term strategic tanking like John Isner. Unlike some of his peers, Federer does not shirk. Even when he loses, the matches are rarely lopsided. Almost every individual game is competitive. A nuanced analysis of chair umpires' point-by-point score sheet in Simpson's Paradox matches would reveal that Federer often wins his service games by 40-love or 40-15, frequently loses his return games after one or more deuces, and drops tightly contested tiebreakers when the set score reaches. That's right, like how often have you seen Roger get a bunch of, some people say Roger is terrible at converting break points because he's like a choker or something. I think Roger's just great at earning tons of break points, and I think Roger is, I read it somewhere, I'm sorry, but we don't have to read it to know it. Roger's one of the most emotional tennis players, and maybe not as brave as Novak Djokovic and Rafa Nadal. Can't blame the guy there. I mean, those guys are like superhuman. Maybe we can put Kevin Anderson in that superhuman, supercomputer category now. In this subset of matches, Federer is just a victim of a scoring system where all individual points are not created equal. What does it all mean? In the end, it means that Federer's dismal record in these quirky matches, somewhat ironically, is yet another data point in support of the empirically driven conclusion that he is the greatest tennis player ever. Oh, I'm not going to crumple up this article. We're going to frame that one up and put it on the wall. All right, Mr. Goat, that's it for us today. Let's hit the outro music and read a couple comments on our way out of here. Hard luck, man. You predicted... I can't read that name. Sorry. Hard luck, man. You predicted Isner to win it all, but it looks like your supercomputer is broken. I think the downfall of the supercomputer is that it can't calculate one important thing, and that's willpower of a particular player. Tennis isn't just numbers and math. It's blood, sweat, tears. That's true, but the supercomputer is not broken. Supercomputer is, I believe, 12 out of 14 correct. And if Djokovic wins, that'll be 13 for 15 matches correctly predicted by the supercomputer. And I will say, I did pick Rafa to overcome the supercomputer for that very reason. I thought he would have so much heart. And you could argue that if Federer got through and wins that match point, if he gets through Isner in the first match of the day fast enough, Rafa gets out there with the roof open. I don't think we can deny that's a big advantage for Rafa. His ball have a little more sting, a little more bounce, a little trickier for Djokovic to work with Rafa's ball with that roof open. This is from Lisa. I was just thinking about Roger's match in Adonomy. Roger actually had a double fault on serve that led to breaking his serve. Yeah, when that person yelled out. We should be proud of Roger. He fought till the end. 13-11 in the fifth is really impressive. It shows us that Roger is okay physically, but needs a little mental work. I need him back. I might be wrong, but I think Roger plays more freely when nothing is expected of him. I totally agree. People aren't going to call Roger the overwhelming favorite going into the US Open. Maybe that will work in his favor. Hit a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, give us a comment below. Thanks for watching Coffee Break Tennis. We'll see you after the finals. See ya!